We wanted it to look like this building had been here for 100 years, even though it was built brand new in 2014.
It was incredible to think about the scale at which he was talking about expanding.
It was almost like Field of Dreams, you know, these big whiskey warehouses popping up with a big Woodinville whiskey on the side.
The brand matters. The experience within the brand for particularly the clients that come to experience it is powerful.
This is Design versus Build, Distillery Edition.
Bourbon. I gotta be honest, I'm a big fan of bourbon. When it comes to bourbon, there's only one state that comes to mind. So I never thought that my pursuit of the next great bourbon would send me to the Pacific Northwest. But that's where you'll find Woodinville Whiskey Company. A distillery proving to be a true expert in the craft of making whiskey. I mean, these guys have to know everything about making whiskey, right?
We had no idea how to make whiskey.
Well, we're off to a great start.
Bourbon is, it's pretty much been a guarded secret. You know, you've had, 6, 7 distilleries making bourbon for hundreds of years up until this craft movement. And it's kind of been passed down from generation to generation. And, our idea was, could you make a better whiskey or attempt to make a better whiskey than what's currently being made out of Kentucky?
Anything boiling out of the pot, going through the column, makes its way all the way to condensing. So everything's based on, like I said, boiling temperatures, all the undesirables in the beginning.
This is Brett Carlile. Brett and his partner, Orlin Sorensen, are founders of Woodinville Whiskey.
2009 is when we sat down, Orlin and I, we wrote a 30-plus page business plan. We thought we were going to conquer the world, and then we realized that it wasn't the best time to be knocking on bank doors asking for money to start a brand new business where you weren't going to see profits for many, many years producing whiskey that had to age. We kind of almost given up on the idea, and then a local bank here had worked with a lot of wineries in the area and really saw value in our business plan and had some faith in us and gave us the money we needed to get going. So we have lots of thanks to that bank for believing in us, and that's been 11 years ago and we're still going strong.
So they have the money, but they still don't know how to make whiskey.
Well, we got lucky and we were able to get a hold of a very smart individual named Dave Pickerel. He was the master distiller at Maker's Mark for over 14 years, and he had recently retired and was starting to do some consulting work. And we got a hold of Dave, and it took a lot of convincing, but we convinced him to fly out from Kentucky and teach 2 boys from Seattle the proper way to make bourbon. Dave really liked working with us because we were a clean slate. We didn't have a background in brewing. He could teach us the proper way to do it without any bad habits trying to influence the way he was teaching us. It was really a crash course in chemistry and chemical engineering, all this stuff, and what we do on a daily basis. It's all chemistry. And I don't have a chemistry background. That was something I shied away with in high school and college. It's a business degree, and I guess they say when you find something you like, you really want to learn all about it, and chemistry became interesting to me because I was applying it to the whiskey making process.
Woodinville has made a name for itself as an excellent craft distillery. But I was curious, how exactly is whiskey made?
Bourbon is pretty simple as far as the ingredients, but yes, it gets very complex when you start with all the production processes.
Let's take that complex process and simplify it. A combination of grains are harvested and stored to create the mash bill. The grains are grounded to a powder and dumped into hot water to create a mash. That mash is then moved to a fermentation tank where yeast is added to begin creating the alcohol. After about 4 days, the fermented mash is dumped into a still which will boil the alcohol out of the mash. As the mash boils in the pot still, vapor rises to the top, carrying the alcohol into a column still. Here, with the help of a series of cold plates, the water condenses back into a liquid, allowing the alcohol to separate into a holding tank. From there, it is barreled and begins the aging process. Now back to Brett.
And how you can adjust them to your advantage to create your own flavor profiles. When we first started, we were about a mile north down the street, a lot smaller location. We were making about a barrel of whiskey a day, but we quickly realized that the more we ran the still, the more whiskey we could make. So we kept adding more fermentation capacity, more mash cooking capacity, to the point where we were out of space.
Brett and Orlin had a great thing going. They had the recipe down and money in hand. They found a slim piece of land down the road, but they had to search outside of Woodinville wine country to find the right design partner. They called on Grand Baba Architects to design their distillery and tasting room.
Orlin sent me a book on Kentucky distilleries just to get our juices flowing. There's a lot of history in Kentucky especially.
We went to them and kind of had a vision for what we wanted to look like. We wanted it to look like this building had been here for 100 years, even though it was built brand new in 2014.
And I think those vernacular rick houses and distilleries really speak to both Brett and Orlin. So we definitely took our cues from some of that. The architecture that they wanted needed to be simple and straightforward, which is sort of a reflection of their brand.
The original distillery in Woodinville was a challenging project because of such a tight site. It had its envelope or vibe that was drawn from the old tobacco buildings that might have been converted into a distillery or a warehouse.
On the interior, it was just a matter of trying to fit, sort of like a Rubik's Cube, a bunch of much larger vessels. So they're effectively increasing their production 6 times, and then we tripled the size of the equipment in order to get them the kind of expanded production that they needed.
When Orlin and Brett came to the table, I felt like we were now at school. You know, we had a professor teaching us, someone that was into it, passionate about it, and it could explain in detail how things worked, what mattered. And then it created a dialogue about how we could celebrate some of those things in an architectural manner, so that experientially, not only for those that were working there, but definitely for the visitors, and how it could be expressed and exposed for people that came to the tasting room or the event space that found its way into the distillery proper, how we could share that experience with anyone that came.
I think Orlin and Brett came to see us as sort of representing their brand. Like, you can see that the distillery now, the building is on their label. So it's sort of, it really is their brand.
And it was only through their teaching and a deeper understanding of how distilleries work, that process, that we were able to do that successfully.
Obviously, our distilling equipment's very shiny, the stainless steel and the copper stills. But then if you look at all the hand railings in the building, it's all carbon steel, unfinished, so it's meant to rust and look industrial. So it's an industrial meets like a modern feel. So they did an incredible job with the design and the fits and finishes.
The building design is cool, but how does the whiskey taste? To get an expert opinion, I met with someone I thought I could trust.
Hey Ben, thanks for having me. I am so glad to talk about my love of bourbon. Well, you are the host, so I didn't have much of a choice, but let's go ahead and get started. Sounds good. Now real quick, where do I look? You or the camera? You're gonna look at me the whole time. Great. Oh, come on. What makes you a bourbon expert? Well, I like bourbon, and I drink a lot of it. So, as they say, practice makes perfect. I see. So, what do you think makes a good bourbon? Well, in my humble expert opinion, good bourbon boils down to taste. If it doesn't taste good, then it's probably not good bourbon. That makes sense. What do you think about Woodinville whiskey? Well, Ben, it's really about a full palate experience. Mind if I demonstrate? Sure, why not? Go ahead. Ooh, you can smell that oak right off the bat. This is a very easy drinker. Now on the taste, you get a hint of vanilla, not regular vanilla, vanilla extract, and a little bit of oakiness, and a bit of warm leather. How do you know what warm leather tastes like? Now on the finish, it gives me a apple tree, cherry tree sort of vibe. It really takes me back to when I was a kid and eating Trick cereal. You know what? I think we got everything that we need. Let's go ahead and transition to the next segment. That's good bourbon. Brett and Orlin were on the hunt to find the perfect environment to age their whiskey, and they found it 166 miles away.
You know, we were a pretty small producer in the beginning, and it was really tough to find a grain supplier that could do what we needed to do. A big grain wholesaler gave us the name of an individual. He said he's a small farmer, but he's pretty crafty, and I think he might be able to help you guys out. So we started buying grain from Arnie, and we really liked the grain quality, and we started using it. Started buying more and more grain. All of our grain comes from Quincy, from Arnie's farm. You know, Arnie started looking around, and he goes, "You don't have a lot of space to store whiskey barrels here." I said, "No, we really don't." And he's like, "What if I built you a barrel aging warehouse on my property? And if it works out, awesome. If not, I've always wanted a big barn for all my tractors and combines." I said, "Sure." Obviously, we didn't just decide, let's just go to Quincy because we can build a warehouse on Arnie's farm. We actually looked at the temperatures in Quincy and kind of compared them to Bardstown, Kentucky. And if you look month by month, they're almost identical as the highs and the lows. The only difference we have is Quincy's a really dry climate versus Kentucky, it's very humid. So we have the same temperature swings, but a drier environment. So we evaporate more to the angels during the aging process. But I'm 100% convinced that it kind of gives our whiskey its own terroir, just that dry aging environment. We get a call one day, and he's like, "Guys, you haven't been over here in a while, but this warehouse is almost full. We need to do another one." So we built another one, made it even bigger, and got the call again later from Arnie. guys, we're running out of space again.
Sounds like it's time to give Grandbaba another call.
On the Quincy project, there was this initial understanding that we were probably going to be using these very large-scale industrial prefabricated metal buildings that are used in industrial applications because they're so cheap. And they allow you to get these massive volumes without a lot of structure in between. You have these steel vents that create the structure on the perimeter of the building, and then you just put up steel siding. And what I learned through my research into the distilling and aging process of whiskey is that the rick houses typically, classically have a very shallow pitch, almost a flat pitch. And that has to do with the way the air moves in the building for the whiskey and to kind of expand and contract within the oak barrels. That all goes into sort of the reason those massing is that form.
I'm proud of Orlin and Brett for choosing to put as much thought on a design side to the facility in Quincy, to what could have been more of an industrial solution with just prefab buildings without the attention to detail. I think that notion that the brand matters, the experience within the brand for those that either work there or particularly the clients that come to experience it, is powerful.
We, as an office, have been kind of excited to work on these very ordinary buildings because the mass is really, can be quite powerful, and there's a potential to do a lot of interesting stuff with some very simple moves. And so we saw it as an opportunity, actually, to take that and to tweak it just in a few simple ways to make it something extraordinary.
It doesn't mean we have to do custom buildings for everything. There's small, subtle moves that can manipulate the prefab buildings. Just the way they're placed in the site can be more thoughtful. And so to be part of that team was really an honor. And I think that they did the brand right by doing so.
It was almost like Field of Dreams, you know, these big whiskey warehouses popping up with a big Woodinville whiskey on the side, and you're driving through farm country, you see rows of corn, all of a sudden you see these big barrel houses popping up. So we wanted these buildings to be appealing as you drive by, appealing to people coming to do the tours as well. So we trusted Grandbaba to pick the right fits and finishes to make those buildings look aesthetically pleasing to the eye and stand the test of time.
Got it. Great design makes a great building. Let's talk about what's inside those warehouses. The distillation process creates the alcohol, but
How does alcohol turn into whiskey? The answer lies in these barrels.
This is our barreling room. So after the whiskey has been processed over in Woodinville, they ship it to us in a tanker, and this is the first location it reaches. Take all of the whiskey out of the back of the tanker and put it into this tank that you see behind me. Once it has reached its proper proof level, the next thing that happens is we put it into the barrels. We fill the barrels right here at this location. And then after the barrels have been filled, we remove them from the rack, put them into a back of a truck, and we transport them over to our rick house. Once they've been filled with the white dog and we put them in the back of the truck for transportation, this is where they go. They sit on our racks for 5 years, and once they're ready to be barreled, we pull them off of these racks and bring them inside to our dumping station. As of right now, we have 2 facilities that are completely constructed. We intend to have a total of 5 buildings on location. The purpose behind that is the hope that each building will go off of a 1-year process. This building should be full within this year, and then we'll start working on filling our next building. There'll be a total of 5. It takes 5 years for our bourbon to age inside of the barrel before it's dumped. So the hope is that we can have this building being emptied for the bottling process 5 years down the road from now. And then our next year, when we go to bottle, we'll be pulling from building number 2, and we'll be working on filling this building at the same time.
Barrel houses hold about 11,000 barrels each right now. Never thought we'd expand this much, but the demand has been there, which has been a blessing.
First thing that happens is they'll come across this rack, and we use a hose and we'll rinse the outside of the barrel off just to get any dirt, debris, different things like that that have attached themselves over to the barrel over that 5-year process. Roll them off of this rack, and then right here is a trough that's in the ground, and we dump the barrels into this trough, and through a pump system, they run through the trough, through a pump into our tanks that are located back behind us. They go through the machine. The second step that they hit is an air cleaning system where it tips the bottles over, and in packaging, sometimes they'll get dust and little pieces of cardboard inside of the bottle. So the air system will tip the bottle over, throw a jet stream of air up into it, clean everything out of the bottle, and then once the bottle has been cleaned by the air system, it gets transported into our filling line. And this is a constantly fed hopper from our proofing tank. The bottles go through here, they get filled up to 750 milliliters. Once they have their proper 750 milliliters, they get a cork on top of them. From the corking system, they go over to the labeler. They get their heat shrink seals put on the top here. We get a heat shrink, comes through our heater, gets sealed up, and then right here it receives its labels. And then at the end of the line, we have 2 people doing quality control, and then from here it gets put back into boxes, puts on pallets, and then palletized, wrapped, and shipped off to be redistributed.
I think it's time for another tasting. Or 2.
And people ask us why we didn't just move the entire distillery to Quincy, because the land's cheap and power's cheap. Well, what if we spent a bunch of money to build a distillery somewhere else and it totally changed the product? It's a risk I really don't want to take. So I know we control every aspect of the production process. I mean, from the mashing to controlled fermentation, everything we do is spot on every single day. But the variables we can't control, that the natural yeast that could be floating through the air, propagating into our fermentation tanks. We have an amazing water source here. We're basically the first stop out of the Cascade Mountains at the Tolt River pipeline that provides us our water. It's all filtered on site. We thought that changing locations from our current spot could potentially change the way the product tastes. So we decided to make everything happen here in Woodinville and then expand everything, the bottling, the barreling, over into Quincy. It was actually advice from Dave Pickerell in the beginning. He said, you know, I see a lot of these distilleries trying to go out and sell 5 cases in 20 states. He goes, that's not how you build a brand. He's like, my best piece of advice is be the hometown favorite. Win your backyard. It's gonna cost you less to market in your own backyard. Really beat that local drum. And so that's what we did. We weren't outside of Washington State until 2018. We didn't want to leave our home market until we had enough volume to support other markets. So in 2018, we branched out to our first new market, which was Northern California. And you know, being the hometown kid, I wonder if we were successful because we were the hometown kid. So I was a little nervous to go into a new market, and just the reactions I was getting was like, all right, we're in a new market, a very competitive market in California, and we're getting these reactions from these top whiskey buyers about the quality of the product. So that's right there was like, we're onto something here.
Watching them grow and really be masters at their craft has been fantastically fulfilling. In our profession, and specifically our firm, we constantly talk about craft. When we can have clients that are also in their own profession or their own medium, very concerned and passionate about craft, it's a great blend and it's a great partnership. It gives us a common passion to discuss the building, the design, the approach, whether it's the materiality, it's the subtlety of detailing, but craft is inherent in our work, and we really enjoy those that understand craft, specifically Woodinville Whiskey and Brett and Orlin as a team.
A lot of things we do are different than the normal, and I don't know, I think we have a different philosophy. We've always, since day one, said we'd never put anything in a barrel or bottle that we didn't make ourselves. So we've never sourced whiskey from somebody else, which is, something to be proud of. A lot of people will put stuff in a bottle and call it craft whiskey, and they didn't make it. They bought it from somebody else. So, I mean, it's a lot of hard work to make your own whiskey from scratch. But we're committed to that from day one, and, I think it shows in the end product.
I'm Ben Roberts, and this is Design versus Build. Now I have you all to myself. Sweet